Okay, so welcome back in the plenary. So I hope that you had enough refreshment in the break. So now we continue with two speakers, with Georg Kraus first and afterwards Carolina. For me it's important to underline that if we are doing this forum, that we want to have a platform for exchange. So one thing is that we have a who is who of important personalities like Nancy, like Raphael, Georg and Carolina. They are all specialists in their field, but my impression is that we have also a lot of specialists among the participants. So for me it's important that you are not only spectators or listeners, that you also have the possibility to exchange with the specialists we invited as speakers. We will do this in the afternoon, but please feel free also in this morning to ask questions if you have. So I want to hand over to Georg now, the next of our speakers. The reflection was when we prepared this forum that one thing of the challenge for Europeans is that we have to look to the world, what is happening all over the world, and not only what is happening in Europe. And what we saw this morning with Nancy and I think also with Raphael is that there are dramatically things happening. And maybe that on one hand we can say these are bad news because it's frightening also to see how in emerging markets companies are growing and taking over also well-known brands, for example. And on the other hand, the question is, are we flexible enough? Is this possible for us, and let me say us as Europeans, I'm a European, to adapt to this change, what is happening in the world at the moment? And so the question, Georg, I hope that you answer this question. How flexible are we, and hopefully are we flexible enough?
Thank you, Remy. So, who of you made a diet? An unsuccessful one? Yeah. Who of you is smoking, even if knowing that it's bad? How can it be? How can it be that despite knowing how it should be better, we are still acting on a way which is, in a certain way, not understandable? And Nancy, you showed example of how it should be, and most of the managers and most of the people in Europe are not crazy. So they are not mad, they are intelligent people, and even knowing what is going on, the day passes and nothing is really changing. And if things are happening, it's more a kind of survival reaction when the things are coming, and not an active way of facing not just the future, but the reality. And this is in fact a question I asked myself. As a consultant, we have to deal every day with change management. Why are we facing people doing all they can to avoid the change? And so I started with this iceberg model to make a little bit the difference between, let's say, the real world of facts, where we all agree very fast about political changes, socio-economic changes, the growth of the emerging countries, blah, 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 all this stuff, where teachers could teach for years about how it is happening. But there seems to be a world under the water, a world of feelings, of not really understandable reactions of people. And today, in my speech, I would like to dive a little bit in the sea and to look, why is it like it is? Maybe I have some answers, maybe not, but these are the questions I'm asking myself. So in fact, the idea is to talk a little bit about epistemology. So it's, what is it? It's in fact the philosophy of knowledge. So how do we deal with the way we are seeing the world, and on the other side, the behavior. Sometimes it's related, sometimes not. So, as I asked the question about the diet or smoking, whatever, we have to understand that our brain is a crazy tool. And what is fascinating in it is that, in fact, we have two brains. Yeah? We have the cerebrum, that's a big brain in which we are thinking, and then we have the cerebellum. That's this small, funny brain here you have at the bottom. Yeah. And scientists are making a lot of researches about these two brains and how they are related. And of course, the cerebellum, so the small brain, the bottom is the archaic brain. That's the animal brain, and that's the brain who is really steering our body, steering all the functions we have, and the cerebrum is in fact the cognitive way of acting. So, and there are also some statistics about that. What do you think? How many calculations per second the cerebrum has? So the big brain, and how many calculations the small cerebellum has per second? So just to have a small guess, what do you think? So the archaic brain, the animal brain, which is steering our behavior, our way of acting. Panic, for example. Sorry? Panic, for example, but the overall behavior, like being addicted to things, acting in a certain way, which is part of your comfort zone, whatever. What do you think? So scientists are saying the cerebellum, so the big brain, has about 50 calculation processes per second. So that's the guess, which is actually in the science. And the cerebellum, 2 million. Yeah. So now you can imagine who's winning the game if these two are competing. What do you think? It's certainly not the brain which is thinking. And in fact, when you start thinking about this competition between these two brains, you start having a first glance of understanding that obviously the rational way of explaining the things might not be sufficient to solve the issue. Because even if knowing how the things are, we are not changing it. Yeah? There are still people, even doctors, smoking. How can it be? They know it. They have every day people coming in their offices with the worst disease, and they're still smoking. How can it be? Because the cerebellum is so strong and so much more powerful that facing reality is not enough. So, okay. That means if we want to change things, it's not just enough to recognize them. If it would be like that, everyone would stop smoking in the same moment. Every diet would work. Everything, every addiction could be changed in a second. But it's not true. So let's go first back to the epistemology view of what is behind that. So one side, that's more the cerebrum way, is saying, hey guys, we have first to talk a little bit what are the truth, what are the beliefs, and what are the justifications we're giving to ourselves to accept the way it is. Yeah. And of course, it's a part which is cognitive, but most of these justifications are very deep. You know, beliefs, the truth is a way you see the world, which is even maybe part of your genes, part of your culture, part of your very fundamental behavior you have. And this behavior, this way of maybe even not wanting to see the world, the way you see it, is creating your image of the world. Yeah. And you know, here the problem starts. Because if you see the things in a certain way, you even maybe don't see the problem somewhere. Even though there is a subconscious process behind that, your experience, your way of accepting reality is creating a certain behavior which is following that one. And we have in our culture, we have in Europe, specific experiences which are creating our world. And you know, since most of you know it, certainly Immanuel Kant was one of the first ones to deal with that, to make it clear that the way our brain is formed is influencing the way we perceive the reality, and not the opposite. So we cannot perceive the reality in a different way as our brain is defined. And here we're coming to a major problem related to change. I call it the experience. The more you have knowledge, the more you experience things in your life which worked, the more difficult for you is to see that it might be different. Because it's even not seen. Yeah? You don't see it. Because how could it be on another way explainable that a company with high-profile managers, Nancy talked about Ford managers managing Jaguar, how can it be that they didn't saw the problems? How can it be? So for an intelligent guy who would say, hey, make it, so what's the issue? Maybe they didn't saw it. And it's in many cases like this. If you see the problem, the solution is easier, but if you even don't see the problem. And we are living in a world where people are doing all they can to avoid seeing the problems. And strikes, social revolutions, things like that, are in a certain way just a reaction on avoiding seeing the reality. Just trying to making the own position even clearer, but not really confronting and facing what is going on. Which is one of the issues when you see social issues, Greece, whatever. Yeah, you see people there and you're listening there on the street, they're fighting, you're listening to them. And in a certain way, I have a kind of pity because my impression I have is, hey, they see the world on a very, very small bandwidth. And of course, out of this bandwidth, their reasoning and their way of acting is pretty clear, but it's a pity that they have just this small view, a glance of what is going on. And now the question is, how can we get people in the future, and in Europe that's the biggest challenge, to broaden a little bit the view of what is going on. And you know, the reactions we have against change, there are a lot of them. I just tried to summarize a few of them. being angry, the politicians are the bad ones. There are also reaction on faith. It's like that, so it's old Europe, huh? So we have to accept it. It's the end. Let's accept it. We will be, I don't know, a national park one day, and for the Chinese coming here and visiting, yeah, the castles in France, and I don't know, Schloss Neuschwanstein in Germany, and yeah, and then we will be tourist guides and things like that. Yeah. That's no more economy because they are better. One way of reacting. You can say, hey, the next 7 years until I'm going to pension will just be enough, yeah. And it's not anymore my problem. Yeah, the next generation should care about that, yeah, not myself. And I'm fighting if there is an issue of not finishing at 65, if it's 67, then of course I'm going on the street and I'm I don't know, doing all I can to fight for my rights, because that's what counts. Pension at 60, no, 55 is even better. Yeah. But not seeing what is going on. And of course, a big issue that there is no really energy and vision, which is in fact a problem everywhere because there is difficult to predict the future. I don't know any manager, if he is honest, to predict what will happen in the next 3 months. Even if he has, he cannot. Yeah? The world is changing so fast that having a clear vision about what will happen in the next 5 years is not possible. So we are more like in the management in a situation like Christopher Columbus, when he said to his people, okay, we want to go to the east, but let's sail to the west. And at a certain point, you know, it's, I think it was after 25 days, that's the so-called point of no return. That's a point when the food is not enough to go back. And you don't know how long you will take to, you even don't know if there is an island on the other side. And maybe sometimes people, I don't know if it happened there, that the seaman came to him and said, Christopher, we have just a small question. Will there be an island and will there be enough food for us? Can he give an honest answer? No. He can say, let's try, let's make it together. And if we are all together, maybe we will survive. But I cannot promise you anything. And that's challenging for a boss. It's very challenging not being able to give answers. Just saying, hey, let's try it together. And you see, a lot of these things are happening. There is fear, there is anger, there is a loss of credibility in the future, and all these things. And we have to deal with that. We have to deal with that on a social way, we have to deal with that on a political way, and we have to deal with that on an economical way, without having answers. So, and in fact, what is the reaction? You know, this that's a joke I like to use pretty often. It's the definition that it's a joke, which said change management is like making scrambled eggs. Yeah. For scrambled eggs, you need chicken with the egg, and you need a pig for the ham. Yeah. And of course, for the chicken, talking about change is not really a problem. Yeah? He likes it. Okay, come, let's make your. There are customers liking scrambled eggs. Let's go for it. Yeah. The pig might have some issues with that. Maybe he will come with the answer, I don't know, maybe vegetarian food is more in fashion than scrambled eggs, and in fact, is it really a good idea to go for it? And So a lot of hesitation, a lot of maybe even resistance against what is going on. And the feeling I have that in our countries, we have a lot of people feeling like pigs. We have a lot of people thinking they are losers out of the game. They think at the end of the day, they will have some advantages coming upon them. Salary, job, I don't know, whatever. So we have to deal with that. We have to deal with people not thinking they are chicken, participating, contributing to a good thing. We have more people thinking, let's wait, let's see, wait and see. So that's a big issue, how to deal with that. So, and you know, there are classical models to explain how you can change that, and I would like to come to one point, which is the one I would like to focus today. But first, to look about the dimensions you have to take in account when you're talking about change in mindset, change in behavior. There are 4 dimensions, classical dimensions. The first one is an intrinsic one. You have to want it. As long as you don't want it, it will not happen. You have to be able to do it, so you need the skills to do it. Because if you want and you're not able, you will also not achieve the result. You have to have an environment who wants it. So if it's not expected, if all around you are behaving in another way, you will maybe say, okay, maybe not for me, maybe the others are right. I was yesterday in Berlin, and you know, it's so funny, the taxi drivers in Berlin are crazy. So I never had a ride in a taxi in Berlin where the taxi driver holds the speed limits. Never ever. Traffic lights on yellow or short red, they just went over, they crossed it. Always speed, 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 speed. So here we have a culture, I don't know how it came so, but where it's pretty normal to drive fast as a taxi driver. In other cities, it's impossible. Every taxi driver would have the fear to lose his license or whatever, and they would really drive as they have to. And it's funny how the expected behavior of an environment is really influencing your ability to participate or not. And of course, you need a framework of supporting actions. You need systems, you need infrastructures which are supporting a certain behavior or not. So you know that's a typical framework how changes in mindset are happening. Now let's look a little bit on what I want to focus on. As I began my speech, I don't want to focus with you today on the cerebrum, on the logical way of thinking and then the conclusion of having to act. There are a lot of nice explanations why we should. Let's talk today about why we don't. Let's talk about why we are not able, even in wanting on a superficial or on an intellectual way, why we don't really proceed like that. And so the question is, how can we really change not just the mindset, which is the typical approach? We have to persuade the people. We have to give them good explanation. And when the guy smoking here in the room next time goes to the doctor, then the doctor is giving him a piece of paper where it's written, you know, there's cancer, there's da-da-da, please read it, please sign it, and then of course you will change, because then you know it. No, you will not. And you see on these cigarette boxes, you know, I think here in different countries they now even don't write anymore what may happen there putting pictures of cancers and whatever on to make it clear. Does it work? No. So obviously, the approach via the cerebrum has its limit. So let's talk about how to change, that's the idea, how to change mindset and how to change behavior without explaining it. Because obviously we have to get in touch with the cerebellum. Yeah, and there are some ideas about that, which are pretty new in the last years, where people are talking about, and I would like to share with you. So, we're not just focusing on behavior. And there is an interesting way to do that, which is pretty understandable in a certain way when we're talking about manual things of doing. Yeah. So, you know, last year I made my pilot's license, and what do you think? How many landings did I need before I was proficient in landing an airplane? 400. So I needed 400 landings before I don't have to think anymore about the landing. Because if you want to land, the critical stage of landing is 3 seconds. So it's the last 3 seconds when you have 20 meters before coming to the runway. These 3 seconds are crucial. Here, small reactions with the plane, throttle, whether small things have to be adjusted, and you don't have the time to read the instrument to say, okay, it's 3 knots too fast, now go to the throttle, go down, oh, there is wind from 230 degrees, press a little bit on the left. You don't have the time to do that. And I remember my first 100 landings, yeah, I always thought about what I have to do, and I always missed the landing, because you don't have the time. So why do you do these 400 landings? You do it so long until it's not anymore part of the cerebrum. You do it so long until it's part of your cerebellum. And today I'm making landings, I even don't know what I've done, but it's just going on the right way. Yeah. So, and I remember at the beginning when I had to land, you know, we have to talk with ATC, with the tower, at the same time you're landing. I couldn't talk and land the airplane. Now I can land and talk with ATC and doing things on parallel because the process is started to be an automatic process. So the question is, how can we get, you know, and on this behavioral thing, we all agree doing things pretty often helps to do it on an automatic way. 10 minutes, okay. The interesting question, can this also happen on the way of thinking? Not just on motoric actions, but also on cognitive actions. Can we brainwash ourselves on a way to reprogram ourselves on important topics for the future, which is acting, no, not acting, thinking differently, automatically, not on a cognitive way. And when we're talking about all these emerging countries, what are the things we are looking on and having respect? It's this energy they have. It's their willingness to win, to go for it. And it's not a cognitive process. It's not something where a manager is saying, okay, now I think it's good to be aggressive and for that reason I'm acting now. No. It's in the genes. They're just acting like that because they are educated like that. That's the social environment they're in, and that's the way they're acting. And we lost some of these. How can we get these back? Here I'm coming to a methodology which is since 2-3 years, a little bit fashionable, and I was a little bit surprised when I heard of it at the beginning. I had also a small issue in understanding it, but it's a very interesting approach. It's the coaching kata, coming from lean management, in fact. And one of the founders of this idea, there was a book which was written about this from Mike Rother, and he summarized, in fact, this. It's a Japanese approach, a very nice one. And you know kata. What kata means? Kata comes from the martial arts, so karate, kung fu, and whatever. And in the martial arts, people are training certain movements so long that when they are once in a real fight, they don't think anymore about what they're doing. They're just doing it because it's a reflex. And the idea was, can we take this way of training, no, not the body, but the brain, to change our way we are approaching things? And that's what is behind that. And in fact, the question is not just thinking about motoric improvements and repetition, but maybe we can talk about a kind of repetition for the brain. So in fact, what we're talking about a concept of reprogramming the deep way we are seeing things and acting accordingly to that, which is not part of our way of understanding education and training and whatever. Because in our culture, the understanding we have is we have people with a clear mindset, we are bringing information to them, they are digesting the information, and then they're doing with this what they want, and that's fine. This approach is a different one. It's, in fact, saying, let's bring people in situations, in cognitive situations, where they have to repeat certain ways of, not of behaving, of thinking, so long until they cannot do it differently. And so in the coaching kata from lean management, they are learning two things, for example, is learn to see and learn to solve. And what does it mean, for example, the trainers from the coaching kata are bringing people every day in situation where they have to first recognize problems. And the idea of bringing people to make it part of their cerebellum is, and that's a fundament of this method, you have to bring people 5 times a day in a situation for a year at least before it starts to work. Because you have to remember the deep paths you have in your brain. You formed your brain over 20 years of a certain way of understanding of things. Cannot be changed in a speech or in a seminar or in reading a book or whatever. No. You cannot stop just stopping smoking just like that. It's so deep that it creates a lot of energy to overcome this. And that means it needs a very, very strong process of permanent, readapting your way of thinking. So, and that's the coaching kata, and kata coaches, for example, in companies who are doing that, are working with the, let's say, the shop floor managers 5 times a day. Just in saying, okay, do you see a problem? No. Okay, let's look a little bit. Yeah. You see that? Oh, yes, you're right. Okay, let's work. 2 hours later, come back. Do you see a problem? No, but maybe you will show me one. Yes, look here. Yes. So every day. And after a certain time, it's so deep in yourself that when you're coming in the morning in the office, you see the things. you cannot avoid it anymore not to see it, because it starts to be part of your way, of your cerebellum. And we are underestimating the energy to put in to really change the way of thinking. We are accepting it for behavior, like motoric behavior, and we do not accept that it's the same for the brain. The brain is a muscle like every other part of the body, and we have to retrain it. And that's a funny thing to think in this way, because it means all the things we are missing, like dealing with uncertainty, not being curious enough, maybe not wanting to succeed anymore, being ready to simplify the things, and maybe some others. I just put some on this list where I think we really have to go in it, is a very deep, energetic process of reprogramming ourselves. And the question is now is how to do that. How to do that. Let's just try, let's take one, I don't know. Being curious. I think that's a big issue in our culture, actually, that we're not curious anymore. And the older we are getting, the less we are. We are accepting, maybe as tourists we go sometimes in a different country, like in a zoo. Oh, it's interesting how they live, and then we go back. Oh, but it's better as we are. So, but how to create curiosity? From the beginning, it starts with children, to bring them permanently in situation of, hey, look, yeah. How to get workers in companies to be curious. Yeah? Lean management is one approach, to say, hey, let's work, let's improve yourself. But we're not doing that enough. And some managers are not, because that costs money, bring people in situation to be curious, trying to develop this permanent need of learning. And not saying, okay, there's one word I really hate the most is need to know. Yeah. So when a manager is saying, you don't have to know that, that's not part of your job. Yeah. But they are. There are companies where you have to focus on your specific function, and if you are curious to, imagine you're just, as an employee, one day you go to another department and say, hey, I want to spend one day with you. Why? I don't know, just like that. I want to know what you're working there. Instead of supporting this, managers would say, hey, but you know, your efficiency should not be impacted by that, and da-da-da-da. We are not supporting the curiosity of our surrounding. And things like that has to be increased in that, but that means a complete different educational and training logic in companies, starting from the management and going down to the shop floor with such a high investment that I'm not sure how many companies are ready to do that, but if you really want to change it, don't stop with the cerebrum, go to the cerebellum. Thank you.
So, thank you. I think it was very clear, this speech. So everybody of us knows now that we have two brains, and that the important thing is how the brain with how many million?
I think that's what is in the science now. The number which you said is 2 million for the cerebellum. Yeah.
With 2 million calculators in 1 second.
In 1 second, and 50 for the cerebrum.
Okay, so if we took away this with the 50, then maybe we continue to survive.
Like animals, yeah.
Like animals, yeah. And I said this morning, please don't panic today. So, so panic is part of the animal brain. Well, now thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any questions at the moment, so you can deepen this this afternoon in the workshop. There's one question, so please, Georg, stay.
Thank you. I wanted to know why you say that we need to repeat things 5 times, not 3 times, not more. Are there some studies about it?
So that's the experience the companies made with this coaching kata. Now focused on really getting people starting to learn to see the problems and then how to solve them. It's they came out at 5 times is the right doses you have to put on the field, and that means 5 times for 10 minutes a day. So you're coming in the morning, first thing you do you see a problem? So, and you know, when I'm talking to these kata coaches and to the people being coached, to the coachees of the kata coaches, the first week is funny, and after the second week it starts to be painful. Again, this guy, what does he want? I don't have time for... So, you know, because then you start really to... You hate it at the end, because you don't see it anymore the need. You say, oh yeah, I understood it, I know, no reason to come again. But before it starts to be part of your genes, part of your fundamental behavior, it has to be day by day, week by week, month by month. And there is a certain time where you start thinking about it. You're just doing it. And then the change begins.
So we had also the example of the 400 landings before you do it automatically, and not to think in these 3 crucial seconds about what is happening.
I had it with my wife, and the socks I left always beneath the bed. It took 2 years.
5 times a day.
At least 1 time a day, but after 2 years, now I cannot differently. When I'm standing up, I'm taking the socks immediately away. Sometimes I hate myself to do that, but I cannot differently. It's part of my basic behavior now. Yeah.
So these are 700 landings. Okay.
This is just a general change question that I'd love to know your opinion on. In my experience, change is so much easier when there's a crisis. If companies, and I would say perhaps European companies over the past 10 years have experienced this, if things are going well or just not going badly, it's very hard to get people to understand they need to change. Even because things are going well, they'll say, well, things are going okay. But if there's a crisis, they realize they either have to change and adapt or they'll die. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, the organization might change, but not the mindset. Mm-hmm. So, and of course, so, you know, I'm dealing a lot with insolvency companies. Yeah, so, and with then consultant coming there in the crisis, chapter 11 and things like that, and they don't understand the concept of change management. So, and I try to explain them, yeah, and you have to change the mindset to say, hey, what's the problem? No, I'm coming in, that's the problem, that's the new organization, that's the debt cut we have, and they go for it. And out of their perspective, they're right, there's no need for, because things are happening and there is no way to, maybe some small resistance at the beginning of people who do not understand, but the facts are there and there is no alternative. It's a pity if change has always to have a crisis, because in this case we are lost. Because most of the companies are not really coming out of the crisis. That's you see that when you have complete branches. Show me companies who are really transforming themselves in a new business model. That's pretty rare. Yeah, maybe Nokia when they came from, I don't know, plastics to mobile phone, cell phones or things like that. But that's the exception. Most of the companies are so strongly related to their business model and their culture that they prefer to perish than to transform themselves. And that shows how strong the beliefs, the truth, the justification of the way of thinking and acting is, and how difficult it is to change, even in the crisis, how to really change. And for that reason, I think it's a valid model to say in the crisis changes are happening. But in fact, in Europe, we have another issue to change a mindset. If we don't change a mindset, we are trapped in a crisis management logic of change and not in a proactive, be ready and wanting to change. So crisis management is always a reaction and not an action.
Okay, thank you, Georg. Your speech showed me that to change structures and organizations seems to be very easy on one hand, but to change the mindset is that's the big challenge.
For us, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so 2 questions and then.
You say European people don't have enough energy right now, and they should have more. I would like to know, as you spoke about role model and culture, what difference do you do between energy and violence? Because yesterday I heard a conference about Norodom Sihanouk and the Khmer, and the culture seemed to be very violent, still now.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, and that's the reason why I wrote on this list where we have to train people. People is wanting to succeed. You know, even 2,000 years ago, we had here in Europe a culture called the Romans, which was in fact a very violent culture. So when you're looking back 2,000 years, how violent the Romans were, it's incredible. And the Greeks, which were in many cases a more sophisticated cultures, didn't have any chance to survive. So in there is certainly, we could have a very nice ethical discussion about what is more important in a society, being ethically correct, being very sophisticated. But if we don't have a certain kind of hunger, and hunger is always related with violence, with the want to succeed. If we don't have that, we would just be overwhelmed by the others. And when I'm going in these emerging countries, that's what I feel. It's a big part of violence. It's a big part of wanting to succeed. You just go in the student classes. You just go there and see how hungry they are to perform, to succeed. That's in fact the fear I have. If we are losing this fear, if we're losing this energy, really wanting to succeed, we might be more happier. So if we're talking on a more higher level, we might be more happier, but at the end of the day, we would be like the Greeks and the Romans, and just be invaded. That's what.
One question, if I understood your model right, first of all, you have to have an entrepreneur at the top of the company who is aware of these facts, who is the one who starts this change process. How could we manage to have an increasing entrepreneurial spirit in Europe, for example? My belief is very often people feel safe as there are others that confirm that there is no need for change. Maybe we have no vision on the political scene for such a change necessity.
Yeah, here we are again back on the cerebrum, which is certainly right, but not my understanding of changing it. I think beneath all these logical, explainable things to do, like vision, like frame, like whatever, the other thing is the solution. And that means for let's say, a manager who doesn't have this vision, that means for me he has to spend a year in China. And you will see when he will come back, he will think differently. And not because he has a vision then, but because he changed his way of acting, because all his surrounding will act differently. And look around you, how many managers have been for longer than a week or two in these countries? And how strong is the risk that you are more influenced, I would say even polluted, by other people showing you that it's okay like it is? We are self-confirming ourselves all the time.
Okay, one other question?
Yeah, thank you. Well, dear Georg, I'm not sure whether it's a question. Maybe it's a start of a talk, a dialogue, and that should be continued later today. But that has to do with that. You know, I for 95%, I fully agree with what you say. We have been talking about that in the past, some of it. But what I hear now is, to some extent, that in the kata training and coaching, something needs to be brought to an individual, a team, or an organization from the outside, which is supposed not to be there. Curiosity, uncertainty, and
which is not developed.
Yeah. Okay, that's where it starts, because it's my experience in working and coaching and developing organizations and teams and individuals, that in Europe the desire to have a different life and the spirit in principle is there, all through organizations, all through the society. However, it has been locked up, locked away at some stage of life, and the issue of creating an entrepreneurial spirit is partly a matter of training new things, because you're not experienced to do that. So that's where the kata training could be, coaching could be very important. But on the other hand, the question of releasing the energy, of letting go the limits, of stepping out of the jail, is part of let's say, the unlearning part, is an important part, and that's on the inside, the inner development.
Coming back to this picture, and yeah, if you have threads on one of these 4 boxes, it will not work. So if you are not in a culture where this is expected, you can make kata coaching as long as you want. It will not change. You need all the 4 boxes. The idea of this kata coaching approach is to say, okay, this we tried, it's not changing. The smokers they want, but they don't change. Yeah. Here we have a very fuzzy environment of people being role models and others being not. Here we try to put incentives on and to create frames, but obviously it seems not to be enough. Here we focus on classical training on the cerebrum, and the idea is to say, let's make it different. Let's accept that these things are as they are, and let's just say, let's bring people to see the problems and learn to solve the problems. And if we are bringing people to change their way of acting, then the other 3 will come as an automatic result out of it. That's the idea.
Okay, thank you.